All right, good afternoon. I'm here today with Christopher Sweeney, the author of Mad Dog Gravison, the recently published book about Thomas Gravison. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm very well. Very well. How are you? You doing well?
Doing great. I'm doing great. So let's talk about this book. I managed to read a little bit of it. Looks very fascinating about a bit of an enigma, really. I think that's perhaps the reason for the title, Mad Dog Gravison, because he is a bit of a mad dog, as we've seen in Everton, in Denmark, in Real Madrid, in Celtic, in anywhere, and even in his post-playing career. Um, so why the name Mad Dog Gravison? Why does he have that nickname?
Well, he got it at Everton. When he went to Everton, he was christened the Mad Dog. But it's out of kind of, it's out of love and affection. He's just a bit of a spontaneous character. He does things how he sees. He doesn't think about tomorrow. He sort of lives in the moment. Sometimes that's to his benefit. I think sometimes maybe not to his benefit. One of his teammates at Everton, a guy called Alan Stubbs, who was one of his captains at Everton, and he described Thomas as the character from Big. Tom Hanks, the movie Big. He described him as that. He was a sort of a lovable guy who just lived in the moment. In Germany, he was called the Humor Bomb. I don't quite know how that translates into English, but because he played at Hamburg before he came to Everton, and for similar reasons, just for his actions on and off the field, he was just a lovable guy, very spontaneous. He didn't know how to take him, and that's kind of why he got these nicknames. He was basically a cult hero to the fans.
Right. Now, after writing a previous book about a John Bultgens, I believe.
Yeah,
Uh,
Bullions. Don't pronounce
Bullion.
it. Yeah, Bullions. Yeah.
Why exactly did you decide to write on Thomas Gravison?
The reason why I wrote about Thomas, even the book about John that I wrote before this, that's about BMX, and I know nothing about BMX, so it was more about him having an interesting life, and similar with Thomas, I'm a big football fan, and I started to hear a few things about him and some things that he'd done and things he'd been involved in, and I didn't know these things, and I thought, well, if I don't know them, other people might know them. And as I started to do a bit of research, I started to find out there was a lot more stuff that I didn't know. That he had this whole other persona away from the football, away from the pitch that really made him stand out, and that's why I say he's the last of the modern footballing mavericks because there aren't footballers like this anymore. They don't make it through to the professional game, and they certainly don't make it through to the top level at clubs like he did. Going to Real Madrid in that Galactical era. You can never find sort of a loose cannon like that nowadays making it to that level of football. It just won't happen. So I think I was attracted for a few of those reasons, but mainly for the guy he is. Not so much he was a footballer. It was just he happened to be a footballer.
Right. And by modern Mavericks, are you placing the likes of Roy Kane and perhaps others in that list alongside Gravison?
Yeah, I would say Roy Keane. I mean, I actually mentioned Roy Keane in the book. Partly sort of comparing him as a Maverick. Yeah, I would say people like Paul Gascoigne, Eric Cantona, Faustino Sprilia, Matt Letizier. I would say these guys are sort of the sort of modern footballing Mavericks. Romario. At the back of the book, I sort of go through maybe about 7 or 8 sort of Mavericks that I would say that have been around. And I think the word Maverick in my understanding of it, I think particularly when I was growing up, it was always meant to be a player who, didn't fulfill the potential or didn't do well or something like that. And I think that's not really the case. I think these guys have done well, and Thomas is an example, someone who did do well. You don't go to Real Madrid if you're rubbish. And you mentioned Roy Keane there. I mean, Roy Keane was the captain of the most successful English team for how many decades? So I think I wanted also maybe to give a different meaning to the word maverick. It's not about these guys that had so much talent and blew it all. It's a bit more than that. They're unique individuals, and that's why they stand out in the game. And I think now there's very, very few of them left.
And what do you think explains the extinction of the modern footballing Maverick?
I think, well, one reason I think there's so much money in football now, so much pressure that players are now signed for clubs at 8, 9, 10 years old. I mean, it's there's millions of pounds changing hands for basically children. Sometimes their families are moved over, or, their parents are given a job in a new country, a new city to attract this young sort of prodigy. Or and even now the English FA have actually put in rules that I think transfer fees start about 10 years old, and it's if you
Mm.
take a player, there's so much you have to pay, and there's all these complicated things, and you have these academies now. I mean, I'm from Glasgow, and Celtic, one of Thomas's old teams, they have a school where the boys get up in the morning, they have their breakfast, they train, they go to this special school that Celtic run, and then they go to training again, and then they're living like professional footballers, and they're still children. It's this academy system of molding people into being athletes and having them like that. I think what happens is, yes, you might get a lot of good players and you might get a lot of professional good athletes, but I think then you start to anyone who's a little bit different who has trouble conforming to that then starts to be pushed out of that. And Thomas came from he's the guy that came from the countryside. He came from a very rural place, and he liked home. And I don't think he'd have thrived in that. And you mentioned Roy Keane. Roy Keane comes from the middle of nowhere in Ireland. He doesn't come from a big place. Like I think certain characters wouldn't get through this academy, and they don't get through this academy. And that's why now footballers, maybe they're not boring, but they certainly come over to normal people as boring. People nowadays don't relate to footballers the same ways they used to, because they just seem to be so sanitized, and whether it's their fault, whether they brought up that way, or whether that's just how life goes, I don't know. But I
Uh,
think that's why you don't get Mavericks anymore.
right. Um, what are some stories do you think that people would be shocked to find out when they think about Thomas Gravesen? I think that a lot of people, when they when the name Thomas Gravesen comes to mind, they think of certain Real Madrid flops like Jonathan Woodgate, for example. Those in that Galactico era that just were sort of head scratching and didn't quite pan out. But you. Like you said, you wouldn't give him that designation of a failed talent. You would perhaps go for something else. So what are certain things that you think people would be shocked to find out when reading this book?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Jonathan Woodgate it's good you brought him up. I mean, I think Jonathan Woodgate, was a bit of a disaster at Real Madrid. He didn't make his mark, but Thomas was there for 18 months, and the big games he played. The other players, talked about him and said he made an impact. I mean, you don't play in a team like that and train with guys like Zidane, Beckham, Figo, Ronaldo, Roberto Carlos. If you can't play, it would be obvious. I mean, he wasn't out his depth, and all the players say that. So I think that's become a tag that I don't know why people think that. Maybe it's because he wasn't the typical footballer. And some of the things he did, for example, in Hamburg, he brought dynamite into training. He thought it'd be a good time to bring some dynamite in, and he talked to his friend and told his friend that it was special fireworks, I think he described them as. And he got his friend to light them, and he said, when you light them, make sure you run. So he ran, and then obviously the dynamite exploded and left this big crater. When he first moves to Hamburg, he misses home. So he buys a motorbike, and he goes about so many 100 miles every day. He sneaks back to Denmark. So he's leaving training in Hamburg, getting on this motorbike, riding like a bat out of hell to get back to Denmark, to spend the night in Denmark, to get up in the morning, to ride like a bat out of hell back to Hamburg. Now, the
And these,
club didn't realise. After a while, they said to him, no, when they realised, no, you can't be doing this. This is not acceptable. Other things he did is he's a very open guy. He's a lovable guy. When he went to Hamburg, he wanted to interact with the team and the city. So what he did was in his apartment, he wrote Gravesen HSV, which is obviously the abbreviation for Hamburg, on his buzzer. So if you were passing in the street and you wanted to chat about the game and you were curious, you could just ring his bell. Now, I mean, how many footballers would do that? I mean, that would you barely get a footballer giving you out their Facebook page. Never mind putting their name on their buzzer. He did loads of stuff. I mean, he used to bring fireworks into training. He would also want to have a slightly lesser car in the winter. So he would have nice cars, but he would sell them and buy second-hand kind of bangers because and especially in England, because he didn't like driving a nice car in the weather when it was raining. He thought there's no point in having a nice car, so I'll sell all my cars and I'll buy a really cheap banger and I'll drive around in that. And then when the sun comes out, I'll start buying a Porsche or whatever it was. So things like that. There's one time at Celtic where the manager's doing a team talk and he's very passionate about this team talk and he's getting right into it. And one of the players looks round and here's Thomas sitting in the dressing room with a newspaper with the eyes cut out, looking through it, listening to the team talk. You know, he was just he just cut from a different cloth, just totally different. You know.
Yeah, definitely. For the youngsters out here, what is one player in modern football who you would perhaps compare Gravesen to? Perhaps the equivalent of in the last decade.
I think off the field there isn't, you know, and that's why it's the last of the modern Mavericks. I mean, I don't think there is anyone like him anymore. I think you'd be struggling to find a player who has a colourful life off the field. And he doesn't do it for headlines, or he wasn't doing it for anything. It was just the way he was. I mean, his summer holidays, one of the players at Celtic said to him, so, you know, what are you doing for your summer holidays? Where are you going? And he said, I'm going back to Denmark. And the guy said, all right, you know, how come? He said, well, I like to go back and go in my parents' basement and play video games all summer. And the guy thought he was joking. And that's what he did. And at this point, he's very wealthy. He's going out, he's dating a very famous Danish porn star. And this is what he's doing in his summer holidays, is going back to sit in his parents' basement and play video games. You know, he really did what he wanted to do. And I don't think there's so many players, I don't think there's any players that I could think of that do that. In terms of his on the field thing, I mean, I think there is players that probably, you know, resemble him on the field. I'm trying to think, I mean, who would be a good example? I mean, he was a combative midfielder with skill. So I'm trying to think really who would be a good example. Maybe Xabi Alonso. Maybe, I know he's retired now. Maybe someone like that might have had shades of Thomas Gravesen, but he was a bit of an all-rounder. He was quite good with the ball. He could dribble. He could tackle. You know, he was a bit of a kind of good all-rounder really, and I think that's what made him a good player. He was quite able to be. He was able to do quite a fair bit of everything, if you know what I mean. Maybe a bit like Wayne Rooney in some ways, you know, that kind of good all-round player. You know, he could play in different positions and not really look too out of place because he was quite good.
So he went from the Danish porn star to the Czech model. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, he split up with the Danish porn star. That ended. And then he disappeared off the face of the earth. He left Celtic and he just disappeared off the face of the earth. And then he reappeared three years later, living in Las Vegas in a gated community with Nicolas Cage, Andre Agassi, and Penn Jillette from the Penn and Teller Magic Duo. They were his neighbours, and he was living or dating this Czech American woman. But I don't know if she was totally a model. Like, I know that's been said, and I think she may have done a bit of modelling, but I think she also is a real estate agent as well. So I'm not sure if she was I don't know if she was like a big time model. I mean, his porn star girlfriend was very famous as a porn star, but I don't know if his girlfriend that became the model was as well known. But they've now split up, so he's no longer with her anyway. So that's all ended.
And the 40 million pounds that is saved up in his bank account, what is that exactly from? Is that from gambling or?
Well, it's more than that. No, it's a lot more than 40 million. It's rumored to be about 100 million. It's a lot more than 40. So,
wow. Incredible.
That is a rumor that if you can find out who first discovered that, you're a better man than me, because you'll see it's all over the internet. But there's no actual, there's no one actually saying. Thomas never said I made this money or I got this money from that. So there's a number of theories. One is that he became a great card player, and he just was able to obviously had a bit of money from the football, so he was able to use that and go into cards and become an expert. Another theory was that he invested in casinos and hotels, and that took off. And another theory is that you just became sort of good at business, like you just sort of got into business and sort of put money into some companies and it paid off for him. But there's no actual proof from him. He's very, very private. He has no social media, has no websites. If you go on YouTube, you'll have a hard time getting any video of actually him talking, and especially in English. I don't think there's anything on YouTube of him speaking English, although he can speak English. So there's no real thing. If my opinion is he probably does have the money because he clearly has a nice lifestyle. I mean, where he was living in America wasn't cheap. It was many millions, and He's bought quite a big bit of land back in Denmark that he was going to redevelop, but that didn't work out for sort of legal issues out with his control. So there's no real reason. I mean, one of the things in the book is there's someone who saw him, and whether you believe this person or not, saw him lose $54 million in a game of like one-on-one poker in a kind of high-stakes Las Vegas room. And you would think, oh, that's a lot of rubbish, but why is the person going to say it? Like, there's no reason for this person to Thomas Gravison is not some well-known person in the Las Vegas poker scene. This person just sort of put that out there. So, like I say with Thomas, that's part of the mystery. You go on Wikipedia now and you can know everything about a footballer. You can know what they have for lunch because they put it on their social media. Whereas with him, there's a lot of if, buts and maybes, and you're not quite sure. And I think that's also part of the attraction. Well, for me, it was anyway.
Grevison's perhaps the biggest prankster that modern football has known. We've got the dynamite, the fireworks, the as we'd call it in America, the teabagging of a Danish mate, the fights with Robinho and Ronaldo while he was at Real Madrid, which got him sent on loan to Celtic. What do you think? Was there any evolution in his pranking career, and what do you think explains just the quantity and really just the ridiculousness of his pranking?
See, again, I don't think he saw it like that. I think he just thought, I'm going to have a laugh here. I'm going to have fun. I mean, apart from the Robinho thing, that was violent. But I think Robinho him and Robinho would have a bit of a clash. He did have a short temper. When he was younger, he was taught a trick by his kind of mentor where he would have 3 stones, well, imaginary 3 stones in one hand, and he would transfer them to his other hand mentally. And that was to kind of give him a bit of time just to calm down and relax. But I wouldn't say he was bad meaning with his pranks. I just think there was no sort of sense of you shouldn't do that. He would just do whatever he thought was the right thing to do, he would do. And with Ronaldo, he ends up knocking Ronaldo's teeth out, which you can imagine. I'm sure Real Madrid's management weren't too happy that their Brazilian superstar was on the floor here getting mauled by this crazy Danish guy, and he ends up knocking his teeth out. But he would do things like that. But I think it was all in good humour. I don't think he was trying to be difficult. I mean, he went through a period of Celtic where he loved Batman, the Batman movies. So he took the whole sort of reserve team to see Batman because he'd been banished from the first team because the manager wasn't seen eye to eye with him. So he went on this trip to Ireland, which was way beneath his level, and it's credit to him that he went because he had a great attitude. He goes there, he's trying really hard, and he takes them all out to see Batman. And for the rest of the trip, on the pitch at training, he pretended to be the Joker. So that's how that's kind of what stuff he would do. I mean, he did loads of things like at Hamburg, he broke into their wellness centre, filled all the sort of baths with bubble bath, and it made this like almost bubble bath infinity pool, and he's sliding about naked, with his friend a lot along it. I mean, they did so much. Like I say, he would have a problem with at training, he didn't like people shouting at him when he was shooting. So he got to this point where at Celtic, he would stop the ball and say, "Don't shout at the shooter." I hate that. Like, when I'm shooting, don't shout. And you're thinking, you play in front of 50, 60,000 people, what the hell difference does it make? So he was just I don't think he was trying to be difficult. I think it's just the way he was. I think he was just like spontaneous. If he thought something was funny or he thought it was a laugh, he did it,
Yeah, definitely. I know there was one story you brought up of him during an Old Firm match asking Barry Ferguson, are there any good places to eat in Glasgow, I believe?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can imagine an Old Firm game, Celtic and Rangers, deadly rivals. It's, it's like absolutely, a white hot atmosphere. And here's the captain of Rangers, their best player as well at the time, coming off at half time. And this Danish guy comes up to him and says, "Excuse me, mate, do you know any good restaurants to go for dinner?" And I mean, I think he thought he was crazy, but he was serious. Again, Thomas would not be, that would just be the game's over. We're going for half time. I want something to eat tonight. I'll ask this guy because he's from Glasgow. He'll probably know a good place to go. He wasn't trying to be funny. Well, I'm not in his mind, so I guess it's hard for me to think, but I don't think he was trying to be funny. That same game, what happens is, before that game starts, the manager says to him, "Right, Thomas, today I need you to focus. You've got to play well." I don't want you talking to the referee. Don't shout at the referee. Don't talk to the referee. I don't want you getting any yellow cards. Just mind your own business. So they're getting ready for the game, and there's a knock at the door about 10 minutes before the game's about to start. And it's the referee wanting to check the boots. Of course, who opens the door? Thomas Gravison. And he looks at the referee and he just says, "Sorry, lad, I'm not allowed to talk to you today," and slams the door in his face. Because that's just the way he was. Everything was just spontaneous. Yeah.
Would you say that Gravison succeeded because of his unique personality, or in spite of it, or perhaps in the middle?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I think at different stages of his career, I think it helped him, and I think at other points it didn't help him. I think when he was starting out, I think he was very determined. One thing that most people talk about him is that he was a bit obsessive with stuff. So he got really into pool. So he would come to Celtic every day with his pool cue. He'd train and then go play pool. Then he became really into Call of Duty. He got really into cars. There was things that he got into that he became sort of almost obsessed with, like the Batman thing. He took it so far that he was impersonating the Joker. He would get really, really into things, quite deeply. So I think at the start of his career, I think that helped because obviously practice, repetition, that developed his skills. But I think when he had someone at certain points in his career, back home in Denmark, he had a guy called Ole Fritzen, who was his kind of mentor, and he was able to get through to Thomas. And when I say get through, I don't mean he let him do what he wanted, but he understood this guy's maybe not your run-of-the-mill guy. He needs a wee bit of, you've got to kind of just give him a wee bit of latitude to be the person he is so that he can play football at the level I know he can. Because when he was at Vejle, which is the club in Denmark he started at, he felt like after training he had nothing to do. So he took a job in a car parts shop selling car parts. And you think to yourself, you're on the cusp of going to the major European leagues. You're obviously a very talented young footballer. What the hell are you doing going to work in a car parts? But for him, well, I've got spare time. I'll just go do that. He was that kind of guy. So you needed someone to get through.
It was just about, doing something else to mix it up.
It was just, I've got spare time in my hands, so let's do that. That sounds like a good idea. So I'll go. I'd quite enjoy that. He wasn't, and then when he goes to Hamburg, he doesn't have that connection. The manager can't quite get round it. Everton, he has it again. Celtic and Real Madrid, he didn't have it. So I think at certain points it helped him, certain points it held him back. And I think really what happened is that the game of football, as it became more modern and became more professional or sanitized or however you want to say it, there was less freedom, flexibility for people to act out of character from what a footballer, and I say that with inverted commas, a footballer should be. And I think ultimately it made Thomas fall out of love with football because at 32, you can still play. He was only 18 months ago playing at Real Madrid, 2 years ago. After 2 years after playing at Real Madrid, he quits football and disappears off to be never seen again for 3 years until he appears in Las Vegas. Clearly something happened. He just must have fallen out of love with football, and I think that's a shame. So yeah, I think his character at different points helped him and didn't help him, depending on who was the other side of the table in terms of being his manager.
Yeah. What's one thing you want people to take away from Mad Dog Gravison?
Well, I see it on the first page. It's a sort of message to Thomas. Basically, be yourself, because he was his self, and good on him. He didn't change. He didn't feel like, I better be quiet, or I better not be this guy because I've got to be something that people expect me to be. And he was himself, and he achieved at a good level. And anyone that says, Thomas Gravison's a failure, I feel like saying, well, did you play for Real Madrid? Did you go to the World Cup? Have you played for Everton in the Premiership in front of so many thousands of people? Have you made millions from football? No, so, shut up, basically. I think there's that thing where, because he was a little bit odd, that meant that he didn't achieve everything. Well, when you look back, if I was his father and it was my son, I'd think, yeah, you did pretty well. So I think I'd like people to take that thing of, be yourself and also be accepting of people. A lot of things Thomas was referred to as a lunatic, a screwball, mental. And some of these terms are, we all maybe use words certain ways, but if you're the person and someone's calling you crazy, a lunatic, a screwball, maybe if you're a sensitive person, maybe that doesn't go down too well with you. Maybe you start to think, is there something wrong with me? Especially kids and stuff like that. I mean, I do call the book Mad Dog because that was his nickname, but it was affectionate. But I do think people should maybe I hope people take from the book, number one, be themselves, and number two, maybe be understanding of other people. We're not all the same, and I think that's to be celebrated, particularly in things like sport where you want to see characters out there. It isn't life or death. It's entertainment, essentially. And, let's do it with a smile on our face.
Right. Mad Dog novel, a Mad Dog book from a Mad Dog writer. Chris, where can they find this book and where can they find you?
Well, it's on Amazon. It's also on all sort of good bookshops online, and also some bad ones too. So if you just put in Mad Dog Thomas Gravison, it should come up. But Amazon is your primary place to go, I think, for it. And myself, I don't have any social media. I've been a journalist for about maybe 15 years, and it's not about me really. It's I'm not really bothered. I'm not trying to sell myself. I'm just trying to sell my work and let people see that for what it is. So you won't really find me anywhere, but you'll find the book online if you have a look for it, I'm sure. Or like I say, on the shelf somewhere in a good sports shop, sports section near you in a decent bookshop.
Mad Dog Gravison on Amazon or a good bookshop. All right. Thank you so much, Christopher. What?
No problem at all. No problem at all.
Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you. And like I said, check it out. It's a thrilling read. All right.
Thank you.